Hi, and welcome to our session today, Mastering SDIs and Inclusive Practices Beyond the Basics as part of the 2026 Paraeducator Conference. This is an advanced level session, so if you are just getting started as a para and you need some basic foundational vocab, definitely check out my other session, as this one is meant more for advanced learning. Here's the session description. If you want to pause and read it, you are free to, but I just wanted to make sure it was readily available to you today. And our paraeducator competency alignment. So paraeducators with your credentials of competency have these different areas. Today's session is going to be supporting competency 5, instructional supports and strategies, specifically those sub areas of support students with specially designed instruction for students with disabilities, follow written instructional plans, implement accommodations and modifications and reinforce concepts, and using effective strategies to facilitate student learning, inclusion, and growth. Hi, my name is Melissa Oberdorf, and I work for the Lincoln Intermediate Unit as a staff developer as part of our training and consultation team. We are located in the Student Services Department, and here's a little identity wheel about me and my email address if you need to get in contact with me. Today's session is going to utilize a reflective purpose approach. So I might be talking to you about some things that you already know, but we're hoping to also refine something that you're doing but could do a little bit better, and reaffirming something that you're doing well and you want to continue doing, and share that knowledge with others that you work with. So welcome, and how to use this session. This session is available and the handout is available for you today. Mastering SDIs and Inclusive Practices Beyond the Basics. It looks like this. This session builds on foundational vocab, and we go way deeper. So as we're thinking today, be ready to come in not just to receive, but to think and engage in how your experiences shape this. So this is definitely an advanced session in a celebratory way. You should be proud to be here as an experienced para, and I just want to make sure that you're in the right place. We're going to get started today with the big 4, what's the difference between them, and then moving into the STACK framework, or the now what framework, when you're given some less than particular guidance in the classroom. Our learning outcomes for today is by the end of this session, you'll be able to identify the key differences between SDI, accommodation, modification, and inclusive practices and/or UDL using your guide. Reflect on the past now what moments and connect it to at least one step of the STACK framework that I'm going to share with you. And write one specific communication statement using the I noticed, I tried, I wonder for a real student situation for a student that you've worked with. This session is for you if you've been in the role of a para for a while and you're ready to go deeper. You're ready to level up. You're ready to get big and strong like Mario is. Maybe you faced a now what moment in the classroom and had to figure it out in real time. You're ready to be more than just a helper. You want to be a strategic partner in supporting the students that you work with and in the classrooms you're in. And maybe sometimes you get directions that are unclear, vague, or incomplete, and you're trying to look at what to do next. All right, the big 4, making sure that we know the difference. We've got SDI, accommodation, modification, and UDL, or inclusive practice. So making sure we know the difference in depth. So quick refresher on those big 4. These are 4 types of support that paras can help deliver, and they are not the same thing. So that's super, super important. Each has a distinct purpose and documentation requirements potentially, and impact on our students. And confusing them can limit student growth and/or undermine IEP fidelity. So your reference card handout guide has everything, has the full breakdown, but we're going to walk through each of the 4 now. Specially designed instruction, written into the IEP, legally required, right? These are things that are instruction-based, not just support. You're helping to instruct the student, maybe instructing them how to use a graphic organizer, instructing them how to use the text-to-speech element on their Chromebook. You might be supporting that implementation, but you are typically not the primary instruction for that SDI. So it might have already been taught by the classroom teacher, and you're just helping to support that in a wraparound way. For each of these, I have a key question. So the key question for SDI is, when you're thinking about it, was the thing that you're doing, the instruction you're giving, specifically designed for this student based on their IEP? If the answer is yes, then it's SDI. You're giving specially designed instruction. Accommodations are leveling the playing field. So if they're accessing the same content at the same level, it's an accommodation. So it does not change the learning for our students. It could be documented in the IEP and or 504 plan if the student has one. Same content and level. We're just making adjustments to it to help the student access it and level the playing field. So accommodations, access is one way I think about it a lot. This might look like extended time on tests or assignments, text-to-speech tools, seating. Now you might be thinking, Melissa, you just said about text-to-speech tools for SDI. Yes. SDI is you teaching the student how to use it, using the text-to-speech. Accommodation is that student has access to text-to-speech to help level the playing field for their assignment or the work that they're doing. For example, if it's a lengthy writing assignment. The key question for this one is, am I helping them access the work or changing the work itself? If it's access, it's accommodations. Modifications is going to be adjusting the task itself. So changing learning goals or grade level expectations. This might be used when grade level content is inaccessible for a student, but you as the parent should not be independently making those modifications or making those decisions. That's something that the IEP team should be deciding on. Some examples of this might be fewer problems. So if everybody else is doing 30 problems for fact fluency, this student might be doing 10. Or if the student is taking a multiple choice question quiz, instead of 4 options, A, B, C, D, they might just have 3. Maybe a lower reading level. I've done this with students in my inclusive science classroom where they were reading the content, but I significantly adjusted it using technology to support their lower reading level, or maybe alternative assessments altogether. Again, another thing I did a lot with students in my inclusive science classroom at times. Caution though, we want to make sure we don't overuse modifications because they may limit grade level opportunities for our students. So we want to use those very intentionally and sparingly. So the key question for modifications is, did someone with IEP authority approve this change or approve the use of this modification? Inclusive practices and universal design for learning. It's going to be something that is proactive for all of our learners. It's built in, not added later. It's very intentional. UDL, Universal Design for Learning, has 3 principles: representation, action, and expression and engagement. And those things are helping to reduce barriers for our students. And, your go-to when you're unsure how to best support students is UDL. So if you want to look some information up on UDL or see if there's other para sessions about it, but UDL is really going to help reduce barriers without changing the learning goals or learning outcomes for the students. So inclusive practices and UDL for some of our students, just very generally, obviously these could be more specific and specialized to our students that might make them something more of an accommodation. But this might be something like a schedule, choices between things, like do you want to write this or do you want to say it out loud, flexible seating, a variety use of different organizers or manipulatives. And the key question for this is, would this help all students, not just one? So if it's something that's going to help all students in the classroom and not just the special education student that you're working and supporting with, that's a good way to know if it's going to be an inclusive practice or a UDL area. All right, we're up with our first generative question. So in your handout, in your guide that you have, the very last page is your notes, and there is a specific section for you to reflect for these generative questions. So I highly encourage you to pause the video after I explain and do that. So I want you to start off by thinking about a student that you currently support. Whether you've supported them in the past, you're going to be supporting them coming up, any student you've ever worked with. Using your reference card or your guidebook, can you identify one SDI, one accommodation, or one inclusive practice in their plan? So the work that you've done with them, can you think back now and be like, oh yeah, that's an accommodation. Oh yeah, that's an SDI. And go ahead and jot them down in the generative question box 1 of your notes. So definitely pause here and go engage in that. All right, moving on to the now what framework. I have this graphic here that I use Gemini to help me create, and being inclusive in all the different pairs that we work with. Have a male on this cover of this one, but he's out in the woods, he's hiking, and he's got two paths to choose. He's got the one, act with wisdom and communicate, and the other one, wait for perfect instruction, which is going to be a dead end. So the now what moment, you probably have been given instructions or a task or something at some point from an educator, teacher, someone. If you're new to the space, that's true too. You have gotten definitely unclear directions from someone at some point, and you're now in a now what? You're like, what am I supposed to do with this? It could come up if you're given a task with little explanation. These unexpected situations are going to happen during lessons, during time that you're being asked to go support a student, and the student needs immediate help that the teacher is asking you to implement. No one might be available to ask. Maybe the teacher's working with a small group, you're working with another student or two, and this is your moment to lead. This is your moment to lean in, all right? Acting wisely, then communicating those decisions later. Communication really is key here, friends, because experienced paras don't wait for perfect instructions. Now, that's not to say you can't ask clarifying statements, but there might be times when you don't have the opportunity to do that. But you act with wisdom and then communicate. So act with wisdom and communicate. I've got a little framework that I'm going to share with you that can help you in these now what moments. And the acronym for that is STACK. Unclear Situational Framework. So STACK stands for stop, think, act, communicate. Stop is, what do I know about the student? Think, what's worked? What does the IEP suggest based on what I've been told previously? And act. Apply an inclusive practice. Don't wait for perfect. Think of an inclusive practice, something to support the student if you're not sure. And then communicate. Log it and tell your teacher what you tried. So stop, think, act, and communicate. And again, this is in your reference handout that you can use and reference daily as well. So let's think a little bit more about some of these proactive communication strategies to support this stop, think, act, communicate. So proactive communication strategies. Do your best to check in with the teacher before lessons when possible, asking that anything specific I should know about today, like if there's math tests going on or it's data collection day and you know you're going to be going to collect data on a bunch of different students. One strategy you can use is I noticed, I tried, I wonder. So for example, I noticed Jalen disengaged when there was really dense text. I tried chunking it into 3 steps. I wonder if a visual summary of the text would help even more. So that's an example of an I noticed, I tried, I wonder. That's a really great strategy to use so that you're not just off the cuff saying, oh, I did chunking with Jalen. Well, tell me more. Well, why? What caused you to do that? Because these situations are going to come up multiple times, and teachers want to make sure they know about that so they can be more intentional in documentation in the IEP and providing the support for students as well. Examples, maybe breaking observations into action. So just like I said with, Jalen, you noticed, you broke that observation. You saw that he was disengaged with chunky text. So you took it and you broke it into 3 different sections. So you noticed something and you did something about it. So breaking your observations into action. So you're not just observing what's going on and telling the teacher about it later. You're making action in that moment to best support the students. Keeping a brief log of unclear situations. Not saying, keeping a brief log of the teacher being unclear, but, if something is happening and coming up, having a little notebook with you, you can jot that down so that you have a running record because, oh, lordy, we know that there's so many things that happen in a day in classrooms and cafeterias and recess areas when we're supporting students that it's hard to keep track of all of them. So whether it's a note thing on your phone or it's a small notebook that you have, but writing down unclear situations so you can go back and communicate those to the people you work with later on is really, really helpful. Now we're at generative question 2. So I'm going to share that with you. And again, there's a spot in your notes to reflect on this. Describe a time you faced an unclear task or now what moment. What did you do? Using this stack, stop, think, act, communicate, what might you do differently now? Write it down on your reference card, your guidebook. Go ahead and pause. Again, there's a specific spot for this for you. All right, moving on to takeaway and closings. So when in doubt, again, default to inclusion. Default moves that are almost always appropriate for students. So offering multiple ways to respond, draw, write, point, say it aloud. When I was working with some of my students in my science classroom, I know I keep referencing that, some of my students were really well versed with drawing. So a lot of times they would draw the things that other students were writing out, and then they would talk to me about them. Break tasks into smaller steps. Scaffolding is always a safe bet. So if a student is having trouble with a big thing, break it down into smaller steps. Provide a visual model or example when possible. This happened a lot too in my writing classroom. If students were doing graphic organizers, they just had no idea like how much they really were supposed to put on that graphic organizer. So they just needed someone to show them what that looked like. And reduce barriers, but never reduce expectations. So if the barrier is writing, can we keep that expectation of writing, but can we reduce the barrier? Can the student do it with a color pencil, a marker, a crayon? Can they use a grippy to help them with the writing a little bit easier? You know the student at the end of the day. Trust what you've observed. You won't always have that perfect information, and that's part of the job, and that's okay. Just do what's best for students, and when in doubt, default to inclusion. We've got our third generative question. I know this one's come in pretty quick after the last one, but what's one step from that stack framework that you apply this week? Be specific. Write it in your notes section as a commitment to yourself. Stop, think, act, communicate. Which one of those areas are you going to be more intentional about this week? For some of you, it might be stopping. Maybe you start, acting or thinking before you really stopped and observed what was happening. Or maybe it's communicating. Maybe you're doing really great things for kids and you're just doing your thing. So you're not communicating it to those around you, but that information is really important for them to keep supporting students as well. All right, our takeaway. We've got our reference card, our Mastering SDIs and Inclusive Practices Beyond the Basics. It's color-coded to match that SDI accommodation, modification, UDL, and inclusive practice from the beginning, where we have the different colored keys. And it's got that stack framework as your now what quick guide to support you when you've been given unclear directions. And use it to identify what type of support you're providing in the moment. There's lots of different ideas and activities and different things on there to support students. So definitely check those out to best support you in the classroom. Again, just a reminder of the learning outcomes. We looked at the differences between SDI, accommodations, modifications, and inclusive practices. We reflected on the past now what moments and connected it to at least one step of the stack framework. And you wrote a communication or a commitment statement. You might be using the I noticed, I tried, I wondered as one of the ways you might be doing that from your generative question 3. But these were our learning outcomes from our session and our time together today. And just remember, my name is Melissa Oberdorf. Please contact me if you need anything, if you're having trouble accessing the guide, anything at all, please reach out so that I can support you in your work that you're doing with students in the classroom. And thank you so much for being with me today.